Hi everyone, welcome to the site. In this video, we will create the dependency injection logic for API key and JWT token validation, and then custom exception handlers for consistent error responses. Let's get started with dependencies.py. Just create a new file called dependencies.py. Here it is. We'll close this config, we don't really need it. So first we'll import FastAPI, import headers, HTTP exception, and then from app.core.config import settings from app.core.security. We'll import verified token. Now we'll create a function def get API key, and then we'll give it API key, which is by the way, a string to header. Of course, this works, and then it will return a string, and then if API key is not equal to settings.api key, then we're going to raise HTTP exception 401 detail. We'll just write our own could not validate API key. Or did I just mistake? Now after this, we're going to return the API key. Fine. API suggestions have become more robust these days. Def get current user, and then we're going to get the token string header. It returns a dictionary and not a string. Then we're going to do if token dot starts with bearer. We're just gonna remove it. Instead, we'll do split. That's the better way of doing it. Next, we're going to define payload. Payload equals to verify token. Then if not payload. So if we did not find payload, what we're going to do is we're going to raise HTTP exception status code 401. Here we'll just write invalid auth credentials, and then we're going to return the payload. So now we've created the dependencies.py. Next, we're going to create the exceptions. Here, what we're going to import is from FastAPI import Fast API and requests. Requests and from fast API dot responses, we will get JSON response. Def register exception handler app. Fast API is the app, and then we're going to create this app exception handler exception. Fine. Async def generic exception handler request. Yeah, request. Exception. Fine. Just looks fine to me. JSON response. Status code 500. Content. We're going to add in a little detail in this content and unexpected intervals rather. Other, comma, and then we will add this. Yeah. I think this should work. We'll try to connect with the terminal and test these. Terminal is here. And in the list and the wait wine me up. Now we'll do Python p dash m. We have this app core dot dependencies. Yeah, works. Next we have exceptions. Works. Both are working fine without throwing any error. So now let's move on to the explanation part. Let's start with dependencies.py. This code snippet defines two fast API dependencies used for securing API endpoints. It provides two different methods of authentication. One is using static API key, and another is using user-specific authentication token. So the first part where we import everything, we just import header and HTTP exceptions from FastAPI. Header is used to tell FastAPI to extract value from the incoming HTTP request headers. And HTTP exception is to return standard HTTP error responses like 401, 403, or whatever it is whenever you need it when the authentication fails. Next, settings and verify token. These both we have already defined in our previous codes. Let's talk about this get API key. So this function ensures that the client making the request has provided a valid system-wide API key. So this particular part is, if you're seeing, it's basically checking. So if it is equal to the uh, API key that we have defined in the settings file, or should we say the environment file, and yeah, that's what it compares against. And if it does not find it, it just raises an HTTP exception 401 that it could not validate the API key, and it basically returns the API key again. So next we'll talk about this function called get current user. So this function is used to authenticate a specific user based on a token provided in the headers. Um, so basically, it takes in a string and it spits out a dictionary. In the standard O2 authentication, this is usually named authorization, but this code expects a custom token header, so it's fine. Then we will do this string check. So if the string that we are receiving, the token, if it starts with bearer, it will split it and only return the token, which is the token part itself. So basically, it robustly handles the client that sends bearer as well as the client sends the raw token. And then we do this check verify token. So if you remember, we had created this verify token function before. So it passes this clean token to verify token, and this custom function that we had created, it handles the heavy lifting of checking the token signature and expiration date. So if this token returns none or false, it's going to raise an error 401 with the detailed invalid authorization credentials. Had we not created this, this would have just given us 401 and we would have not been able to figure out what exactly is the issue. And if this issue is not there, it's just going to return the payload. Payload is basically a dictionary that can contain details like ID, email, or whatever. So it can be directly used in the API endpoint. Now let's talk about exceptions.py. This code snippet defines a global exception handler for FastAPI application that we are building. It is designed to act as a catch-all safety net. So if any part of our application crashes out or throws an error that we did not explicitly anticipate, this code is going to step in and handle gracefully rather than letting the server crash out or return a messy unformatted error to the client. So here's the breakdown. So the first part imports the fast API request and imports the core fast API class, application class, and the request object, which basically holds all the data for incoming HTTP requests that trigger the response. Then we have JSON response. So basically, a specific type of response in Fast API used to return data formatted as JSON, which is the standard format for API responses. So let's talk about this particular function. So this function acts as a setup or a wrapper function. Instead of cluttering your main py file with error handling logic, you define it here and simply pass your fast API instance to this function. When the application starts, it basically exposes the FastAPI application object as its argument, and the exception handler. What it does is it's basically the core magic of the snippet. It is a decorator that tells FastAPI listen for any error that inherits from the base Python exception class. And because all the errors in Python inherit from the exception, this effectively catches every unhandled error in our entire app. Um, and then the handler logic is there. So what that does is it is basically an asynchronous function, so it is triggered by the decorator above, and it automatically receives the request that causes the crash, and the actual object, basically the exact part that requested over here, and then instead of crashing the server, it intercepts the error and returns a structured JSON response. So it sets the HTTP status code to 500, internal server error, which is the standard way to tell the client that something went wrong on our end. So then the content is there. So it basically formats a clean JSON payload to the client, and yeah, that's about it. So this is how we handle exceptions. We've also corrected the dependencies. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.